Well, we have a special treat for you all today in honor of Father's Day and Pentecost, where the Spirit is blowing and is bringing new things into our world, is clearing out old cobwebs and bringing transforming energies into our world. I decided to invite two of our members, Kyle Roy, and our moderator, Daniel Russo, to speak to us this morning along the topic of reimagining fatherhood. This is really going to be fun. I have invited them to provide some reflection about how they have been thinking about being fathers, how they think now that they have children, young children, both of them, about being sons, about how they think about being a father in light of the way in which Jesus challenged traditional ways of being a man in his society and offered maybe a different way of framing of course, humanity, but also masculinity in that particular culture. And what might that significance be for today? And so they're each going to speak for 5 minutes or so, and then we're going to invite them to respond to each other, to have a little bit of a dialogue. And we will then give you a chance to ask questions or respond and offer your reflections as well. So we are going to begin with Daniel.
All right. Thank you, Janet. So Dante here recently turned 5 months old, and this is my first time celebrating Father's Day as a father. Yeah. And he even made his first ever artwork here. Yeah, that's not his handwriting, but that's his footprint and his smudgy handprints because his hands are hard to keep still. And yeah, you are my superhero. Gosh, that is a hard thing to live up to when you really think about it. But a father can mean a lot to a son, and I have to always be conscious of that. I feel fortunate to have grown up with a father who didn't push the old-fashioned manly stereotypes on me, and I never felt like I had to take it like a man or man up, or just repress my emotions at home. I did feel that as I went to school, on the other hand, as the tendrils of patriarchy end up finding their way into our lives one way or another. But my dad, he encouraged my creativity and my curiosity from an early age. And he would write down scripts that I narrated to him when I was like 4 years old. I still have them upstairs in fading pencil. Um, and would later set up treasure hunts for me on my birthdays. And he accepted the fact that I would never love sports as much as he did. Um, Although I would end up getting into running later and kind of becoming somewhat of an athlete myself. Um, but at the same time, there was kind of an implicit acceptance of gender roles that I didn't really come to understand until later. That, I mean, it was kind of expected that the women would do the cooking and the cleaning up after meals while the men just kind of watched TV. And since my only sibling is a brother, I kind of grew up in a house of men except for my mother. In a way, and she was very particular about her cleaning and won't let anyone else do it. Many cases, uh, but a man preparing a meal would be a big deal. Like when my dad grilled something or made something for my mom for a special day for her. But I've been gradually learning to try to get more comfortable with cooking myself and taking on more of it, especially now with Dante around, to show him a better example of both parents sharing roles. And yeah, sharing my life with Joanne has really helped me to understand a lot of concepts better. Just like feminism and LGBTQ representation. And over the years, I've become more sensitive to racism and the history of it and how we still perpetuate it through implicit bias, which is something I brought up in my Pilgrim column that's going to be going out soon. So I want Dante to grow up as a feminist, anti-racist, and just generally be respectful and thoughtful about the feelings of others. And also, getting back to the idea of the sheep that Jesus was talking about, I want to encourage your curiosity. And, get that sheep went astray because it was exploring, it wanted to venture out. It wanted to understand the world around it. And I want to encourage that in you, but I want to make sure you never get lost out there for good. And I'm at a point right now where I'm feeling kind of overwhelmed myself by just the responsibilities of fatherhood, being the moderator, starting a new job that makes me feel like that kid in the Far Side comic who's raising his hand to be excused from class because his brain is full. And being in the middle of a pandemic and a deeply divided country and a great reckoning with our history of racism. So, yeah, I think you, little guy, help save me from some of that feeling of overwhelm sometimes, making sure that daddy doesn't get lost. But don't feel pressure. It's not your responsibility to make sure daddy doesn't get lost. But you help me. You help me a lot. And I want to help you too. Oh. Okay, that's what I got.
Thank you so much, Daniel. That was lovely. And Dante, you did a wonderful job helping your dad with that. And I have a feeling Thomas and Soren have helped Kyle a little bit with his reflection as well. So Kyle, you are up.
Wonderful. I need to let my father super ego set a timer so that my mother spirit doesn't talk and keep y'all here till 3. Alexa, set a timer, 6.5 minutes. Reverend Janet invited me to have a generous 5 minutes, so I'm going to take 6 minutes and 30 seconds. All right, so I think every act or every piece of communication is a performance. And holy shit, I had no idea it was Pentecost, Father Janet.
What was that again?
I said, I had no idea it was Pentecost this week, Father Janet.
It's Pentecost, the whole season after Pentecost, yes.
Oh, well, wonderful.
The whole season, yes.
Well, I had quite a week, and I can't, and I just kind of want to talk about the week a little bit. But what I'm wearing is sort of the message too, right? It says the old gods are watching, and it's got my Celtic ancestral god Carnunos, who is a man that is super hairy and built and sexy, and also has horns. He's connected to the world, and he sees things and he brings them, and he brings fertility. And the old gods are watching. But what are the old gods in the light of Christianity? And how can we think of those things in the nature of fatherhood? There's just too much. This week has been filled with literally dreams and visions. When I answered the call to have this conversation, I told Reverend Janet, wow, this is going to be really transformative and it's going to be healing. And I just have this new understanding of like the truth behind maybe the corruption of the name it, claim it gospel or the Pentecostals who are willing to think about spirit, and how I've been so closed off by Babylon, and the need to understand how God's work and be his agent in the world. And what does that mean to be father? The first thought came as a complete translation of the Bible using Black spiritual music and And the messages from our Black superiors, including the gangster rap, to challenge our liberal conceptions of trauma in a culture and how we need to help them overcome things. And I wanted to decode it for you all so you can see it and understand that that's also an expression of the holy. My wife, watched me through this process and gently said, "I don't understand, and I don't think you can do that in 5 minutes, honey." And I reached out to my Black loving friends for some help. And all I came up with is, wow, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and the Word was with God. And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. And realizing, okay, only halfway through, that I'm an existentialist absurdist. And that sounds like just a way for a white boy to have a special identity in Portland. But if you trust in the generosity of my spirit and my attempt to communicate with you in this digital platform where we're all just digital representations of an already understood and mysterious thing called the other, then you'll believe, it's all very confusing, but I've always seen the world as absolutely absurd. I've always been all the way alone. I've always stared into the void. And I think that that's why I can understand things that other white people can't understand. I know from my addiction what it's like to be turned into the other and to be helped by spiritual people who are trying to fix my moral problem. And I know that the freedom from that didn't come from there, but from going to the desert with my wife and kids and talking to snakes and poisonous trees until they talked to me. And so I understand my daddy, who is our Native American congregant, when he talks to me about talking to trees. Anyway, what came out of all of this is, we can't talk about this here. We have to talk about it in Sheldon's art gallery because everything is unknowable. You cannot translate the tongues of Babylon. You have to love the person that is speaking in the Babylonian dialect to listen and learn their language. And you can't translate the language of the tribes of Israel that are wandering through the desert. You can only decide, am I going to see their humanity and trust that they are the chosen ones of Israel and become a convert, maybe that lost child of Israel, and join them? Or are you going to be the Romans that are chasing them with your armies of police officers and police officers with tits called social workers? And are you going to try to impose the theological structures of Babylon onto God's chosen people? So what came out of it was this theology of Black supremacy. And the question in this time of, do we need to grapple, as a white church, do we need to play around with the concept as a tool of developing a real and true theology of Black supremacy? And do we mean it when we pray to the gender fluid God, or do we just hear women are godly too? Are we stuck in modernity? Have we maintained or represented the shackles of the, oh shit, that's off. There goes the superego. Anyway, how this ties in to my life as a father is, can I see the theys among us as an expression of, and probably the best expression of, the gender fluid God who broods with us like mother hen? And can I understand that it's not about my white politeness or wokeness or my Babylonian structures of understanding and deciding if they are holy and pure, but about deconstructing the pilgrim in me who wants to understand purity and put that on a test of whether or not they can become a cousin of we, but to learn from their humanity and trust. And that's hard for me. I could preach to you guys till 6, man. I've got, a whole musical, and Grant's going to write it for me. Sorry, Grant. And I got to shut the hell up. Anyway, I think my conversational prompts are kind of like Plato writing about Socrates talking to Thrasymachus, and in the language of my son as Socrates, my elder, and me as the child, and also as my youngest son as Plato in the cave. Anyway, hopefully you didn't understand any of that and you're really confused and you have a lot of questions and you have problems with what I said. Because that's where God is. It's in the conversation. God is within us, but only becomes manifest between us. That had nothing to do with Father's Day. I'm sorry.
Kyle, thank you. Thank you so much. Wow. That was so beautifully raw and honest and vulnerable. That was definitely one of the most honest and truthful things probably anybody's ever heard in church. So thank you for bringing it. Thank you for being real. What you shared reminds me like of a jazz tune or maybe a rap. I think if we think of kind of what you were sharing, like as a genre of music, like rap or jazz, I think it's just something. It's like a poem. I mean, like we would have to sit and just really reflect on that for a very long time and maybe hear it a few different times. And I know it would never come out the same, which is part of what jazz is, right? So it also your really deep probing question about do we need Black supremacy reminds me of Black theology, actually, which I was introduced to in seminary. Some may have heard of it. It's a form of liberation theology. One of its most famous proponents is James Cone, who was one of my professors at Union Seminary, and he basically, was trying to turn that on whiteness and blackness on its head. And so you did a beautiful job of that. So there's lots for food for thought there. But I appreciate your thoughts and your questions and your wrestling. And I want to see if you and Daniel, you definitely brought us a wonderful complementarity of reflection styles and content. And so I'd like to see if you or Daniel have any questions or comments you'd like to offer one another before I open it up to the wider congregation.
Yeah, hey, Kyle. Wow, you're on quite a plane there. I think you're muted right now. I was just wondering, how do you translate the music of all that into like your daily lived life as a father practice?
Well, it just started like with these visions and dreams this week, so I have no idea. But I think it was in my soul. I don't think that like it came from on high or anything. I honestly think it has something to do with my lifestyle, right? And the things that we would characterize as bad choices, or the wanderings of the sheep that we need to run and rescue as the white savior. Living life in the hood with my intentions of exploiting it, with my drug habit, but finding out that actually I was an agent of Black autonomous reparations, that isn't waiting for the white guy to come and save it. I don't know. A weird life, an absolutely weird non-Christian life, I think, is how I incorporate it, in my development of Christianity. And my question for you is, man, that brings me back. I love your baby this year, and those hopes, man, the superhero, wow, how is that in your soul?
Oh gosh. Well, I mean, it's just I find that whatever I do manage to accomplish, I got to break it down. I got to put it into the smallest pieces, get into like, what can I manage right now? What can I, is it just a matter of just like, making sure he has a clean diaper today?
Right.
Or, getting on top of that, playing with him. I have a hard time. I need to talk to him a lot as a parent. And I'm trying to figure that out more. Just like what to say, especially early in the morning when my coffee is still processing. What to what to share with him as his first introduction to language. I mean, but at the same time, not give it that weight, because we can't give everything this tremendous weight that just keeps it from moving. Because if it does become hard to pin down, too ethereal, then we can't live it. We can't. I mean, because and the Bible just becomes something that you stitch into a sampler instead of something that you can actually practice and use to improve yourself as a human being. Man, yeah, you're way farther ahead in this game than I am. And yeah, what have you learned along the way from your kids?
Oh man, well, my creative vision of this, sermon where we were talking at each other instead of with each other is like the fact that as they grow, they are your father. You're not their father. And that, like with Thomas, right? He is both profoundly disabled, and Babylon puts him in a special class, where only special kids can go, so he doesn't scare the other children. And he is Socrates. He's the smartest little kid I've ever met. I come from a family of, a world famous biochemist uncle and a lot of strangeness. And my wife is a physician, and he's got us both beat by like 80 points on the IQ scale at least. And understanding competence, and learning to believe that my child can teach me, and that I don't need to be the father protector. That is also what I need to be sometimes, but not to him. I need to talk to him man to man, human to human, woman to woman, and trust what he has to say, and just enter into a dialogue, and then that relationship that emerges becomes father. Like yesterday, I was mad at him. I had one of those daddy moments that you're going to have. You need to understand the rules because I'm protecting you. And he said, "Daddy, don't call yourself my father." And I was like, oh God, who is your daddy? I need to know some things. But not really, and I was like, but I didn't project my masculinity on him. And I just said, well, what do you mean? And he said, well, when you're angry, call yourself I. Say, I am wanting you to follow the rules. Don't call yourself father. And that connects, I think, directly to your superhero father's, that huge weight of being the superhero and being vulnerable and naked, so your kid knows that the superhero isn't you. You're an image of the superhero,
Yeah, because you have the potential to use that authority as like a weapon, and we got to be like very careful about that. Yeah, while at the same time trying to be careful of raising white boys who the world might not say no to quite enough. Making sure that they understand. I got there's a part in the gospel about Jesus talking about the humbleness of a child, and I don't tend to think of children as being particularly humble. I think that's part of the innocence, that they just will take and say anything that they want to,
right,
until you tell them that they can't. And then you better have a pretty good reason why, or else they'll just get upset and won't listen to you.
Exactly. Like, so it's amazing. Like, so, Thomas and I, we have this father time, and so does Soren, but his gospel comes in the form of, Daddy, but I love you. I want to sit on your lap and give you kisses. So he's at a younger age of being a God, or like God or in an image of God. But Thomas, I just tell him there are no rules in Daddy, at bedtime. You can say anything and ask anything. And it's allowed him to say things like, hey, Daddy, he asked me the other day, what is an allergy? Does it mean you can't breathe and you die? And I said, well, yeah, some of them, the really, really bad allergies. And then he said, well, so do Black people have really, really bad allergies to police officers? And is that why that man has a broken neck? And he's 5. And he's special. And he has to be secluded from the white children at the school so they're not afraid, so they can learn appropriately. The Black guy in me says there's many ways to make it better, but I can't say that in a white church because of our white guilt and our inability, to really be raw and honest and talk because of the problematic history that is us and in us.
Yeah, people like us have taken up a lot of space in the past.
Right. And so it's the time to sit back and listen. And so that goes full circle into this like reinterpretation of the white boy that acts like a Black boy, not as a cultural appropriator, but as an early convert or something, who knows how to listen and hear and act right and use the right language.
Well, and then there's this whole thing about like, what is white identity? We can't like express white pride. So we're kind of, we're reading this book right now about raising white kids. And just like, not having that kind of culture to go back to, or at least not anything we can be proud of.
Right. And yet, the slave ancestor in me, maybe there's a 1-drop rule. Maybe I feel comfortable saying these things because I'm a little bit Black. I don't know. I just think it's because I'm crazy. I think there is beauty in our white culture. And I think that when we really, really dig deep and get rid of our fear and form deep relationships with our Black fathers, we find out the beauty in our culture, right? But it's our own internalized version of trying to get rid of our white supremacy that causes us to hate our culture instead of see it as something demonic sort of manipulated and caused us to be blind or something. Science, my wife's a doctor, the emergency doctors that will see anyone and heal anyone with their Western ideas of sickness and will remove, a bullet from your body and not ask any questions. That's beautiful. I don't know. It's hard to see the culture though, because we're so dominant, right? We feel like that we have no culture. That was my childhood upbringing. What is my culture? I have no culture. I feel like my people sprung out of the tobacco field somewhere in Kentucky, out of the dirt. And which is just a way of expressing white supremacy and the confusing thing that it does to the white soul, and the fact that we're all trapped in some sort of trauma. And maybe getting out of that somehow through prayer and fasting and getting somewhere, and just dealing with these conflicts bravely and not worrying about offending with our words and trusting our fathers to correct us gently, and that they already love us and forgive us because they're our spiritual fathers. I don't know.
I'm gonna draw this to a close, but wow, thank you so much, Kyle and Daniel, for that dialogue. That was really powerful and really an amazing model, I think, for us. We don't often, in our society, I think, get a chance to hear 2 men have this kind of raw and honest conversation with one another. And boy, the questions you're raising, I think they're questions many of us have, whether we're male or female. What does it mean to be masculine or feminine in this world? What does it mean to be white or Black? Remembering that those are really socially constructed identities anyway. They're not biological identities. Daniel, your question about white pride or not having it or not having white culture and all of that, it reminds me of the fact that whiteness was created basically as an identity in the United States in order to put legal structures in place to keep Black people from having things that those of European descent had access to. And so maybe the way to think of it is more, yes, I'm an amalgam of a lot of things, but what parts, where are my people from? Maybe I can have Irish pride, or maybe I can have Greek pride or Italian pride. I mean, deconstructing like who we are and what it means to have the identities we have. Boy, it's the work of our time, I think. We were going to have some time for congregational response, but that was such a rich fishbowl conversation, really, that I'm going to hold that, and we're going to have a chance for, if you got the bulletin today, there's some prompts for reflection. What did you hear in Daniel or Kyle's reflections that reminded you of something in your own life? How does the gospel in our current moment call us to reimagine fatherhood and maleness or masculinity in more life-giving ways? Threw in another one here. Can a parent in a female body be a dad? Can a parent in a male body be a mom? Why or why not? Let's just take a moment, folks, for just a moment for silence, just to reflect on, let settle within us what we have heard. If you feel a little disturbed in your spirit, that's okay. These are disturbing times, and anytime we share in a raw way with one another, it can be disturbing to our soul, but maybe it can be a holy disturbance when it's baptized and sprinkled with God's Spirit. So let's just take a moment for silent reflection, and then we will continue with the service, and we'll have that opportunity for shared response together in the coffee hour time. Let's pray together.